Well, I mean, he's got hurry on. We got to get going with this week in fascism.
Yeah, well, this week in colonialism.
Very few Nazis, though.
No. No.
Again, we're real Nazi adjacent.
Yeah, exactly.
For both of these, there's
Well,
Nazis,
that's because the
Nazis on the
world-
periphery.
The world keeps leaning towards fascism.
Well, especially lately, that's the thing.
Yeah.
No,
I
not
thought
especially
these were
lately.
both
This has
movies
been
for-
ongoing for a while.
Our times.
Although, I mean, I said this yesterday. I mean, if nothing else, these two movies were a healthy dose of historical perspective. That as bad as we think things are now, they've always been pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just crazy to think this wasn't that long ago either.
Oh, it wasn't. It was within my lifetime.
Twitter in 1966 and 69.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these guys were organizing just by word of mouth. You think about
it. They didn't have Twitter back then. What they had was graffiti.
Right.
An awful lot of this was organized both in France and in Algiers through graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
Like they would paint, like, talk to this guy and put somebody's like code name up, and then you would go and find that person, and then they would.
The gun is in the fruit basket.
Yeah, kind of like.
I mean,
and it doesn't have any bullets.
I just love the idea of somebody bombing a milk bar. Has anyone here been in a milk bar?
What is a milk bar? What's a milk bar?
As far as I know, it's a bar that just serves non-alcoholic drinks.
It's the bar that they go to in
Clockwork Orange. I know.
But that reverses it. That's the whole thing. A milk
right?
bar was supposed to be this wholesome kind of place, but in that movie, they actually put drugs in them. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Moloko plus.
Moloko plus.
This film definitely has a side, it has a point of view, and it is fairly unrelenting in that point of view. It is
I don't think you could make this movie now.
This is a thoroughly Marxist film.
No, it's not. No, it's not. This movie, the one thing that it absolutely does is say there's no good sides here.
Yes.
Okay, well, actually, that begs the question about this, because the thing is, you're talking about these guys who were rather rightfully fighting colonialism, fighting off the French, and doing that kind of thing, but they're also blowing up bars,
murdering civilians, kids, women,
and the camera work is unsympathetic.
It's very like cinema verite.
Some films they have to take a side will actually blow it up from a distance. This one has all the close-ups in there. Then you see
the cinematographer said that they were going for like a neo-realist look.
Oh, I could not.
Yeah.
They had to say in the advertising.
It's very Rossellini.
None of this uses actual footage.
Right. There's no newsreel in it.
Like documentary footage in it, which is amazing.
It just the whole thing feels like it.
Yeah.
Well, labor's, again, extras are cheap in there.
I know, but well choreographed extras filmed with a very this is happening documentary style, and I think in 1966,
maybe some veterans of the actual.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know.
Not maybe.
Okay,
There's
definitely.
absolutely
of the four, two of them I think were actually in the war, right?
Well, one of the guys he wrote the book that the movie's based on.
One of the guys in the movie,
Saadi Yassef. He plays like the guy who's really calm, who comes in is like above,
Oh yeah. The guy's got glasses, right?
He's got
sort of
glasses,
sort of erudite kind of guy. Yeah.
I'm actually going to stick with what I said earlier about this being a Marxist film. It's maybe a more Trotskyist, kind of permanent revolution thing. But this was text when I was going to college, and they really drove it home on this film. Let me finish my point. The point I'm making is that the stuff you do see with the cafes being blown up is a demonstration that when people are oppressed, there are no limits. The things they have to do to be free. And that's the point they're making in a brutal way in this film.
Well, there's that line where they get the guy in the room where he says something to the effect of, and I wish I'd written this down, like, I'll trade you.
It's the baskets. How can you defend hiding bombs in baskets? He says, well, you can kill a lot more people with a plane. I'll trade my baskets for a plane.
Yeah, you give me the bombers and you can have the baskets.
That's fucking great.
That's a very straightforward demonstration.
While we're talking about that scene, because that's after one of the main guys is caught and he's making that speech to the press. Why did the French give him that opportunity to basically do a press conference and defend his side?
because well, for two reasons. One, the real guy, so he's based on a real person. The colonel's based on a couple of real people.
Right. He's sort of an
Darth Vader
amalgam.
here.
Yeah. The real French colonel actually did respect them. Like he did, even though he did, and we'll get into it, some horrifically brutal things. Like he did actually respect their convictions and their desire to fight. But also, I think they figured that they were going to put this guy out there in front of the press, and he was going to come across as some sort of like frothing lunatic.
Yeah, this probably third world weirdo who's going to like harm his own cause.
Right.
Yeah.
And what you get instead of that is you get a very, it's a third worldist point of view. It's a very like, we don't need your colonialism. We don't need the Soviets' colonialism. What we need is to be left alone and do our own determinism. And like, no one expected that. So, because the French didn't respect them as being intelligent. I mean, what's the first thing they say about Ali is that he's illiterate. And it's like, yeah, well, you can be illiterate and still be smart. Like your ability to read doesn't change whether or not you're intelligent. It doesn't change whether or not you have good ideas. Like,
yeah, and I love that the film draws this guy Ali in just a few strokes. You know what I mean? It's like you see him gambling on the street, gets arrested. He sees a guy get executed, guillotined.
Yeah.
Guillotine. Yeah.
French are traditionalists, man. They
Woo!
I think the French stopped guillotining people in like 1977.
Correct.
Like,
yeah, very
Probably.
recently, yes.
And then bam, he's a revolutionary. You know, I mean, it's like 3 beats and he's a revolutionary.
Well, it takes very little, right? You know, you get whacked on the back of the head by a cop. You know, you see more of that in the second movie.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that.
There's a lot of head whacking in the second. Well, we'll get there.
There's a fair amount of head whacking in this movie. There's
That's
also,
true. That's true.
and in both movies, a fair amount of wobbly batons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a fair amount of just street riding in both of these movies.
Some of the batons are wobbly, right?
They're like
but
rubber hoses,
it doesn't
right?
make them less impactful.
No.
Mhm.
No, but there's definitely some stunt batons that we're seeing on.
Yeah.
Also, rolling back to talking about like giving the guy a press conference, back in the 50s, people were not as media sophisticated as we are now, so they probably didn't even give it a second thought. So you want to give him a press? Who cares? Just let him do it. You know.
Well, they also didn't expect there to be probably people there filming it. They expected people to take photos.
And then the guy's doing shorthand or something like that. Yeah.
Right, and the French press
That's
was essentially
true. It's interesting. It's kind of like they're on a glide path after coming out of World War II, where it's like we're the good guys.
Right.
And everybody's mindset is
Everyone was in the
good guys.
resistance.
Well,
everybody was in the resistance. Here's
and a lot of the people who were torturing people in Algeria were resistance fighters. Like these guys got like they got
promoted really high up after the war was over.
The character that Bijard, who is one of the main influences for the colonel in this, was a resistance fighter. Like he helped literally throw the Nazis out of parts of southern France. Like and so everybody looked at these people and said, like, they're the good guys.
That's the thing. That argument
how quickly they became the bad guys.
That came up at least once in the film. They talk about how can he be a bad guy. He actually fought the Nazis.
Right.
That was like the shield. The second thing is about this is, you know, I'm not exaggerating to say that part of the French national character is fiercely defending French national character, national culture. You know, it's because it's the only one in the world, right? Isn't like Europe.
Well, it's the best one.
No, it's English speaking cultures everywhere in a lot of ways. And the thing is, the French are very jealous of it, and you can see that feeling in there that Algeria was turning into a little, you know, the Algiers like a little Paris. They were exporting everything I think they liked that. I think it was that's why it was there. They weren't trying to get along. They were trying to stamp their thing on top of that country.
Well, and the same thing was happening in Ho Chi Minh at the time too. Like it was like we're literally it's very much the way that the British thought about the Indians as being, and this is a direct quote from the time, brown Englishmen.
That's
right. Like they wanted them to wear tweed, and they wanted them to become lawyers and all of that other stuff. And like they would even export Indians who
Well,
were
that's
on
why
their
they
side.
ended up in Uganda and Burma and everything.
Africa and-
The
in
sort
South
of
Africa.
mid-level civil servants were
Yeah,
all
right.
Indian, South Asian.
But
Yeah.
anyway, so as a film, it was really
As a film,
the film itself was very effective. I thought, although the French Darth Vader showing up was kind of like, all right, we're casting our lines hard here near the end, and this guy was just.
But
Well, I like
his
the
little
way it
wraparound
builds up,
glasses and
though.
such.
It
He
builds
was
up
like,
really
here's your bad
slowly.
guy.
no, I mean, as a film, I thought this movie was astonishing. Like, and I said this before. Like, I try to think about like contextualize the time that this came out, 1966. I mean, this is pretty flipping groundbreaking. I understand why it's as highly regarded as it is. I think that I actually had to Google like where did they get this footage, and I was sort of surprised to find out that they didn't get this footage. They created this footage.
Yeah.
Yes, there are non-actors, and yes, the looping is terrible, etc. But it has a "you are here" feeling that I really kind of got into.
He was doing 20 to 40 takes at a time.
Oh yeah.
I think that I do not know whether you could make this movie now, if for no other reason than it does kind of portray both sides of this struggle as human beings.
Right.
They're not caricatures most of the time. I mean, compared to, say, for instance, we'll get to the next movie, but those characters are caricatures.
Uh-oh.
Fighting for their fucking freedom. And I felt like the movie did a pretty good job of, humanizing this struggle. And I mentioned this before, like it was funny to watch this in the middle of some of us who were watching Andor and think about how much Andor feels like it was heavily influenced by this movie.
A little bit.
I think so.
Well, the downstream effects of this movie are vast.
Yeah.
Like you like Christopher Nolan cites this as being one of his favorite movies. Like there's a lot of people who look back on that. There was another director.
What's that, Jim?
Werner Herzog.
Yeah.
There was another director who I can't remember who was asked in an interview, like, what's a movie that you think changed the world? And he pauses for a minute and he goes, I think the Battle of Algiers. Like it's one of those films, and I'm just bummed that that Jim picked this, because this was like literally the top of my short list. Like, I was going to pick this movie.
Hey, at least you got that.
Is that it does have so much cultural weight behind it, because it was shown in the US and it was nominated for Oscars in 2 different years. It was nominated for best foreign.
It was shown in the US before it was shown in France.
France by 4 years.
Uh-huh.
But it was nominated for best foreign film, and then it was nominated for best writing 2 years later. Like, they literally came back and were like, we should actually recognize this again, like.
I tell you, there's that scene at the end, like behind me, like I've mentioned this before when we talked about like Anthropoid. Like, there's something about movies where you've got a scene where a bunch of characters know they're about to die.
Yes.
That like just,
and how do they handle it?
How do they handle it? I mean, the scenes where they know they're about to get blown to bits.
Right.
And it's the most, I mean, handled in the most noble way you can imagine under the circumstances. And then you've got this crowd of people outside. Well, we told them come out, and they didn't come out. So here we go. Boom.
Yeah.
All right.
And then he fires up a cigarette.
It mirrors an earlier scene, right, where they do come out.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I love the way this film builds up. It just keeps going up and up and getting more and more, which is sort of like the history of the war in Algeria. But yeah, you have this scene where, like, I love when the colonel there tells that guy, there's like a general who comes to watch them blow them up. He's like, you should stand back now, because set off the explosive.
There ends up being, I guess, 2 endings though, right? So it's like you've got that ending, and then the coda.
Right.
Okay, at the end of the day, I guess the struggle was all like it ended up moving in the direction of
at the end. It became a popular movement.
Right. It goes from being the MNA and the FLA as soldiers to being the entire populace of the country. It takes about 2 years for that to happen.
Which rolls back to that Marxist argument I'm making. That's what they're talking about. You get people energized about these things. These guys have to sacrifice to get people politicized, get people on the street. That's what they're showing here. It's almost textbook. I'm going back to the technique though that Chris has seen. It was really flying. I love the part where the director was using like kind of a native sound, like a percussive sound. I don't know what that was.
There's drumming. It is Algerian drumming.
It's wonderful. It's so propulsive. It was way ahead of its time. I mean, in terms of,
the amazing thing about that is that Ennio Morricone and the director fought the entire movie about whose idea was better for the soundtrack, because they just kept bouncing off of each other. And there's this amazing anecdote that I read that the director came to Morricone's house, and he was walking up the stairs, and he'd had this thought in his mind of this like piece that he wanted to use, and so he's like humming it as he's walking up the stairs, and he comes up the stairs, he knocks on the door, and Morricone opens the door, and he's like, I have this idea, and Morricone goes, hold on, and he goes back into his house, and he comes back and he plays him this piece of music, and it's exactly the same thing.
Whoa!
And and the two of them are like, oh well, we finally, with as different as our ideas are, we've come to the same conclusion about this, and we think this is what we should use as part of the score. Years later, Morricone goes, I heard him humming as he came up the stairs, so I ran back and
That's good.
Which is why Morricone's a genius, because he was like, I know how to fix this.
Right.
Of all the directors to say that this movie changed the world, it was Todd Solondz.
Yeah.
Oh, he said it too, huh?
The one that said it.
Yeah. I don't exactly see.
It may change
connection, but okay.
It didn't change him that much, but okay.
Right, no, changing the world and changing your point of view are completely different.
They're not the same thing. Yeah.
It just struck me watching this thing how little things have changed. It's like the tactics, the guerrilla warfare and stuff. It's like I've seen it in later movies because they're still doing all this stuff. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I felt like the 3 bombings. Reminded me a lot of Godfather.
A little bit.
The baptism scene, right? Where just kill everybody.
They're settling scores.
Michael settles his scores.
Exactly. Also, one thing about watching this is I kind of, had to really put myself in the place of the time in the late 50s. And part of it is because what's happening in Iran right now, because I don't think that there's these guys are talking about revolution, talking about becoming a pan-African socialist movement like that. And all the women are there with chadors and like the veil saying, yeah, me too. And like, no, it's like, no. But the thing is, I had to kind of like step back and say, well, this was, again, James Brown, it was a man's world back then.
However, they cut their hair, they take the veils off, and they become part of the movement, because they understand that that's how you can subvert the French's sort of natural misogyny,
because they wave them through. They're like saying,
they immediately you can speak French well. You can speak French well. You're a pretty young woman without a veil. You're obviously one of us.
If you're going to wear a dress and speak French and look European, you're going to be able to walk around barricades. You wear like a veil and the big thing, you're not going to be able to.
Right, you're an outsider.
To that, you know what I mean?
But the thing is that. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
The big thing is that the French population that was born there. So you have the colonized people, you have the natives, and you have the French, and in between you had a fairly sizable population of pieds noirs, the Blackfeet, who were French or French descent people born in Algeria. And they all had like different agendas, basically, because they were totally pissed off by the end when the French pulled out. because they do, right? It worked.
No, they're
like
the second generation colonizers. You can see that's probably the most of the people that were at the bars.
Yeah. It's not even second generation. Like these are third and fourth generation.
Right.
They've been there since 1830.
Right. It's over 100 years, right?
Yeah, they've been there since
fifth generation
1830.
colonizers, exactly.
Mm.
Same that the French sticking around in Vietnam after like the French pulled out. It's like
one of the other things too is that this also leads into a misunderstanding about Islam, is that the French's perspective on Islam is that, much like their Catholicism, it is a prescriptivist religion that does not allow for adjustment, that does not allow for any step out of line from orthodoxy. And that's not how Islam works. Islam is a religion that teaches you to survive. And if your survival means you take the veil off and you cut your hair and you carry bombs into a bar, if you're doing that to survive, you are serving the prophet. Like, it's not like what Christians especially think about as religious doctrine, where you are required to exactly fit into this mold at all times. Like, you can eat pork to survive. You can eat pork because somebody forces you to, and that doesn't make you a sinner. Right. Like, you're allowed to step outside of the bonds that are normally put on you by society as a defense for your society. And like the whole thing is that they played against the French's the French's lack of understanding of their culture, and that's one of the reasons that they win in the long run, is that the French believe that they understand these people and they don't.
Right, which is ironic because the one Frenchman who does understand him is behind Chris there.
Yep.
The Colonel has
flirts
with it goes almost beyond understanding the enemy. It's like he almost has like sympathy for them.
He respects them, definitely.
He respects them, and it plays out in the final scene where they blow the fucking house up.
Yeah. Well, he knew how to do it. That's the thing. That's part about respect.
Well, he tells the guy when he gets him in the car, the guy who wouldn't get blown up in the house, he's like, "I've had your file on my desk for ages.
Right, I feel like I know you.
I feel like I know you, and I feel like you wouldn't sacrifice yourself in just some, nonsensical, whatever.
Like, in another reality, I could have called you friend.
More or less. Right.
There was quite a few moments like that. Well, like there was that scene where the kid was getting beat up by the crowd of French people, and the gendarmes jumped in and prevented the kid who had what did he do? Did he set off a bomb, or I forget what he did? And they protected the kid, the Algerian.
I think he attacked
because it was like, no, you can't beat up a kid. It doesn't matter what he did. So there's repeated moments where it's like the French sort of, we're civilized. We will torture people for information if that's what we got to do, but we're not going to let a crowd beat up a kid. We're not going to, acknowledge these people's humanity even as we subjugate them.
There's certain barriers we won't pass.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's certain barriers we won't pass directly in front of our eyes. We'll drop napalm on their villages.
Yeah.
We won't. Yeah.
The whole thing about the Muslims get that from the Jews, because in Judaism, if somebody forces you to eat pork and say, like, you eat pork or I kill your wife and children, it's like you're beholden to eat pork at that point.
Right.
Because
you have to protect the tribe.
Otherwise, the orthodoxy in Judaism is they see it as you committing suicide to be a martyr.
Right.
And that's like verboten, basically.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Jared's corner.
Jared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with most everything everyone's saying. I liked it. I mean, it did feel like neo-realism. I thought about film school. I had never seen this before, but I saw a lot of like Rossellini and the filmmaking style was very documentary, very of the moment.
It's referred to a lot in film school, isn't it?
Well, I'd heard, I'd only known this movie by reputation.
Yeah.
And
same here.
And it was, it's got some moments that are pulled off beautifully and striking. It's got some moments that are kind of clunky from a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah.
But it all works, and Yeah, I mean, it was, you know,
I feel like that clunkiness though actually it helps the movie because it gives it more of that documentary feeling.
yeah, it's raw. It feels
It is raw.
It's
for sure,
definitely raw.
Yeah.
Good term
but,
for it,
yeah, but no,
effective. And visually very effective. I mean, there's some great stuff. The high contrast, black and white. There's some shots. First of all, the location is incredible. It's like there's no level surfaces anywhere.
No shit.
Stairs.
The place is built inside of a mountain or something like that.
God.
I know. It's like you'd have great thighs. You lived.
The chase scene goes from like downstairs, turn the corner, go upstairs, turn the corner, go downstairs. It's madness.
The sun is a lot like that.
The sun was so bright that they had to cover most of the shooting with sheets to diffuse the light because it would just be too harsh lighting. Like you couldn't see anything in the shadows.
You had to knock that. Yeah, but black and white stock had to knock that contrast down. You didn't get shots.
And back to the,
I think they were shooting it in like tri-X or
back to the music. Like we'll get to this too, but I really loved the score in both these pictures very much.
Yes,
I like the one in this more, but yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay,
I'm glad I finally saw it.
Same here. I'm glad I finally saw it too.
Also,
I also want to shout out.
But not the
I want to shout out the restoration, the 4K restoration of it.
Pretty spooky,
fucking incredible.
Yeah, it's good.
Like
stuff.
it's and if you read that whole intro that they have at the beginning, it's like, yeah, we took this from the original negatives and the original sound negatives, but then we had a print from 1966, so we compared it to the print from 1966 while we were doing the restoration. And the print was provided by the director's family, so he just had a print of this movie in his house, and so they were able to actually contrast it correctly to the way he'd originally done it. And God damn, it's another one of these black and white movies that's been recently restored that looks impeccable. Like it. All the edges are so crisp. Like you can see every detail.
There's something about original black and white photography that, like the since you're not taking 3 strips and putting it down to one, that is crisper. Because that Herzog flick, which is not like he didn't have a nickel 98 to like shoot that, and it is that print is luminous.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
The only thing I've seen that's better is I saw a mediocre Fritz Lang silent movie from the late 20s.
Well, I was going to say, look at Carl Dreyer's early,
those, and I saw an original. It was a new print struck from the negative in Munich, and it was on nitrate, silver nitrate.
Wow.
Because there's only a few places you can watch that in the States because of the insurance.
It'll blow up.
In flames.
But if you,
it'll blow up the whole movie theater, not just.
It was so beautiful. I mean, it had this quality that you felt like the film was alive as it was being projected. So,
well, the thing about. The great thing about the studio system back then is that they'd shoot it, and the negatives would go. They would make the inner positives from the negatives, and they would put those in a goddamn salt mine. They would hide. They would control the environment, and you'd have to have these guards. You have to ask them really nice to have them bring the original negatives out. That's why they're so beautiful. So
it could have been the same cave that they put the members of Congress in if there's a nuclear strike.
The one from the day that
Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah. So exactly. So that's good. All right, wait. Let's do the thumbs at this point.
Come on.
All right.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Great movie.
All right. Now it's
It was just a lot of fun. It was great seeing because I don't think
less
I've seen
depressing
it in about
than the other one.
35 years.